Very happy to welcome back to the show here on the Freedom Side, Kambale Musavuli, who is an activist, a writer, and an analyst with the Center for Research on the Congo. Kambale, thank you so much for being back with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, just for those maybe who haven't seen it, can you just give us a capsule view of what took place in Guinea with this coup?
Where do I start? I mean, I'll try to be as brief as I could. A few days ago, on Sunday actually, a group of soldiers, special force soldiers, could present them as such, went to the palace, took the president hostage, and took control of the country. They stated that the reason they are taking control of the country is because of the corruption, the personalization of the state institutions, and the usual challenges of the country. These are true concerns of the people of Guinea. The people of Guinea have a president, who's no longer president, of course, Alpha Conde, who changed the constitution a few years ago, and last year there was a rigged election. He changed the constitution to run for a third term when the country only had 2 terms. So after the elections last year, most of the population, they were not happy with the political scene, and many actually disengaged from the political scene. And it's like corruption as usual, and they start wanting to find other means of changing the country. So what the soldiers are saying is actually the aspirations of the people. But what's really important to say is that I don't think that the Guinean people call for military rule or for soldiers to take over the country. And who these soldiers are is really important. The leader of the group, his name is Mamadi Doumbouya. He's a former French soldier, French legionnaire, who was called back in the country by the president of Guinea, Alpha Conde, in 2018 to start a special force that worked directly with the president and the French military. France has a military operation in West Africa, in the Sahel region, going after what they call terrorists in the region. Most analysts have looked at it very clearly and said that this is not really to go after the terrorists, but it's to secure mining interest of France, particularly uranium that's in Niger, Mali, and the area. So this unit has been closely working with the French military in different operations. And of course, for some of us who are following the military movement in West Africa, they've been closely working with the United States military, Africa, the US African Command. And that's quite disturbing. It's not even something hidden. You could go to the US Embassy Facebook page, the US Embassy in Conakry Facebook page. You move all the way down to October 15, 2018. You will see a fancy picture of the soldier, Mamadi Doumbouya, with African soldiers in front of the US Embassy. And the caption itself clearly stated that the US military is working very closely with the Guinean military, particularly for missions and training called Flintlock 2019, that they've been running in Burkina Faso with other soldiers. Another thing to know about the coup leader, being trained by the French, being trained by the Americans, having a military unit not working in collaboration with the Ministry of Defense of Guinea, these soldiers have also been trained by the US military, be it in Burkina Faso, be it the US War College. And additionally, he also has received training for Israel. But what does that all mean? So we have a group of soldiers who decided on Sunday to take control of the country, using the aspiration of the population as the reason for the attack. What does that actually mean? Is the United States clearly behind it? I can tell you as a Congolese, in 1996, there was a war in the DRC. There were soldiers who went on TV and stated that they were bringing democracy in DRC in 1996. 2 decades later, we know that these soldiers were Rwandan and Ugandan forces, trained, equipped, and financed by the US military. The invasions of the DRC at that time to today has taken the lives of over 6 million people. And we've seen this over and over, right? We've seen it also in Mali, that the coup leader in Mali was also a US trained soldier. Surprisingly, Goita in Mali, who was also a Malian soldier trained by the United States who did the coup, was in the same class as Doumbouya of Guinea, both trained by Africa, right? We saw another coup just this year. So we've had 3 military coups on the African continent in 2021. The military coup in Chad had also a soldier trained by Western power, particularly France. So why are we having these military coups? Some will argue that these military coups come from the aspiration of the people. I disagree. The people want revolutionary change. In the case of Guinea, this is a strategic country in West Africa that has bauxite, the ore that's transformed into aluminum. They have the largest iron deposit in the world. Everyone is looking at it. High-grade iron, largest top reserve of iron in the world. And Australia, actually, which is the second producer of iron in the world, has been calling the iron deposit mines in the mountain, the Simandou Mountains, as the Pilara killer. To give you a context why I'm mentioning that, in Australia, they have a mine called Pilara. So they're looking at the Guinea deposits as a competitor. So they're saying that the mine in Guinea is a killer of the business. And of course, we can go on and on about the minerals. So they have bauxite, they have diamond, they have gold, they have iron. And these mineral resources are very important for the development, not of the world, but of the Guinean people. They have not seen the benefit of that. And it's quite saddening to see a military rule take control of the country, which is not coming from a revolutionary process of the Guinean people.
And thank you for laying that out. I think it's crucially important to understanding this. And, one piece that I'm very curious about is how are you placing events like this in the context of the geopolitical competition with China that the West is engaging in? I mean, it really seems that Africa is the front lines in many ways of that conflict.
Any conflict that's happening on the African continent, because we are looking at it in silos sometimes. Say, oh, there is a coup in Guinea or there is a coup in Mali. But when you start putting the bigger picture, you are noticing that these coups and instabilities are happening in countries where China has interests, particular interests around minerals. So some will argue about what China is doing on the African continent. I'm very objective with what China is doing on the African continent. China has been a partner with the African people since the 60s. While they were assassinating Patrice Lumumba by the United States and the CIA, the Chinese were supporting the forces fighting those who killed Patrice Lumumba. I still remember the Mulelelist with Mao books training Congolese to fight CIA stooges. There have been also partners of Africans around development. Some may argue around the deals that they have. Those are bureaucratic and technocratic deals that can be dealt with in making sure that contract reflects the interests of the African people. But what we do know as it relates to China, China is not supporting military coups. It's not instigating regime change. It's not invading other African countries. But when we look at Western powers, that's actually what's happening. So in the case of Guinea, China has billions of dollars of investment, particularly in iron and also in bauxite for the aluminum. The iron ore is really important to also understand why this coup can become a serious issue around the geopolitics, the new Cold War that's happening between the US and China. For those who are following it closely, you know that Australia and China right now are in conflict. Australia is no longer a trading partner with China, and China used to get its iron directly from Australia, right? Most of the iron that China actually used came from Australia. So now they don't get the iron from there. They actually have a better price, better quality iron ore right in Guinea. After getting access and control of this iron deal, now there is a military coup. which is going to bring everything else to be renegotiated, discussed, and so on. But that's not just happening in Guinea. It's also happening in DRC. As we speak today, Chinese investment in the DRC are all being renegotiated. Now, what has unfolded there? In 2006, from 2001 to 2006, there were Congolese who engaged with China to have a deal that will help the DRC. In those deals in DRC that we struck with China, it was a $9 billion deal for infrastructure and mineral swap. China will get copper and cobalt. Congo will get roads, hospitals, schools built. Surprisingly, this was not liked by the United States. So they put pressure on the Congolese government. And in 2009, this deal was renegotiated. On the Financial Times, actually, the Chinese ambassador at the time stated that the Western powers are blackmailing the Congolese government. This deal became $6 billion in 2009. Strangely enough, we speak this month, right? We are in 2021. The Congolese government, after pressure of the US ambassador and the US government, they are asking the Chinese to renegotiate the $6 billion deal that they renegotiated already in 2009. And the question I put out was, those who are putting pressure on the Congolese government, do they want Congo to have roads, hospitals, schools? What's the interest of continuing to decrease the development of the DRC that's needed? And one particular thing from the deal in the DRC that's connected to Guinea is that there is a deal to build a dam, an electric dam that was given to the Three Gorges Corporation to actually build. That one last month was taken away from them and given to an Australian company. And the Australian company, Fortescue, is also in Guinea. So I will talk about Guinea right now. I talk about the coup. At the same time that there is a coup there, an Australian company has taken a deal that China had in DRC, right? And then we can continue to look at the different countries of what is actually happening and the pressure that's happening on African governments, where they would tell them, well, you need to renegotiate the Chinese contract before you get any money from the World Bank and any review from the IMF. So this coup, I'm clear, is an expression of the new Cold War, where the US is flexing its powers, using direct and indirect means to put pressure on China and remove China as a trading partner on the African continent. And for us as Africans, we must be very careful about what is happening now.
No, I think that's very important. And you know, one other element of this that I just wanted to speak to, and certainly anything else you want to throw, is that the excuse behind a lot of this from the Western powers, whether it be in DRC, whether it be in the Sahelian region, now in Mozambique, is, well, ISIS is coming to Africa, and we have to push back against reminding ourselves the just having left Afghanistan, almost a redux of that kind of war propaganda. Well, we must be more in Africa because we have to counter terrorism. And I'm curious what you think about that.
There is no ISIS in DRC. I'm very clear of that. Even though the State Department has put out a statement and put Congo in a terrorist group, countries harboring terrorists, I'm clear that there is no ISIS. Not because I'm saying that. There is extensive research and reporting on this. The United Nations group of experts published multiple reports stating that rebels in DRC have no connections in DRC. And just logic. You know, this is a country with majority Christians. That doesn't mean that there is anything right or wrong about Christianity. But pushing the narrative with a country the size of Western Europe, with a population, Muslim population less than 5%, is ludicrous. So we know this is not the reason why they are there. In the case of Mozambique and the DRC, we are hearing this terrorist threat after major discoveries. Right? In Mozambique is the natural gas that's been discovered there. In DRC is 2.5 billion barrels of oil discovered in one lake. So those two are directly connected. And the late Wangari Maathai from Kenya, before she passed away, said about wars in Africa. He said that when we look at these conflicts, on the African continent is always about the resources. So for anyone looking into what the United States is doing on the African continent with US AFRICOM, they are not there to stop any terrorists. If they can't defeat Taliban, how are they going to do that on the African continent? Right? So we already know that they don't even have the military power to stop a terrorist group that they themselves have supported over decades, right? Then on the African continent, the major reason why the United States AFRICOM is operating is, I'll present a few things. One is to counter China's presence on the African continent. And two is to secure such strategic minerals and resources that is needed to make the US war machine and economy function. As long as what they know to do best is use the military. They're not interested in dialogues with the locals and say that, oh, you have gold, I'll pay you $10 for it, and I'll sell it for this amount. They rather say, I'm not going to pay you. I'm going to bribe someone to come and force you to work in the mine, right? So that's, I guess, the simplistic way of explaining how they engage in putting puppet leaders, creating chaos on the African continent. And of course, after the Afghanistan debacle, everyone around the world is clear. The United States cannot defeat any terrorist group. Their track record already shows it. So what they are doing on the African continent is definitely not going after so-called ISIS, but protecting the strategic interests on the African continent and working to counter China.
You know, I'm curious what we're seeing in terms of popular movements on the continent, because it seems if they're spending all this time putting in these puppet regimes and others, that they have some fear if there was real free choice, that people would be choosing very different paths in terms of who's leading their country.
The African people have shown it. In the case of Guinea, it's clear. The Guinean people went to the election and did not want Alpha Conde to be the leader. So whenever you look at the aspirations of the African people, the engagements on the ground, even when we look at Mali, when we look at the Mali coup, it happened the day where there was a call for major protests across the nation and a general strike across the country. So the day they're supposed to do a major strike to bring down the regime is the day the military decide to do the coup led by a US trained soldier. So the African people have that in them, that they want to have a say in the decision-making process. They're engaging actually on the ground. Unfortunately, for the case of Guinea, Mali, and others, there is extensive information about what is happening in these countries, but it's in French, right? Because those are countries colonized by France, and DRC also is the same. So it takes quite some time for the information of popular movement and organization taking place in this country to get into the Anglophone world. But African people have been organizing, have been resisting. Just as in the resistance has happened in Haiti, it's also happening on the African continent. And thanks to the Freedom Side and what you all are doing to bring these stories to people so that people are clear. African people are not saying we want some US trained soldier to take over the country.
Right.
They're saying we want to elect our leaders. We want to take control of our land and resources. We want to exploit those resources for the benefit of the people so that we can have roads, hospitals, schools, and live in peace and dignity on our land.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kambale, as always, really appreciate you being willing to come and help us explore a range of these issues. A lot to continue to keep covering, but thank you so much for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you always, and looking forward to the next Freedom Side.
Absolutely.